We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Dominique Reese. She is the Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Plug and Play. Dominique, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Dominique Reese. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And when I was growing up, I always wanted to be a veterinarian, just because I had a lot of pets growing up, but my mom never let me have a dog. So I was determined to either work with dogs. Now I have a dog. So I understand why my mom didn't want one when I was younger. And it's okay. His name's Remy. He's very cute.
Very cute. Is it Remy after Ratatouille?
Yes, it actually is. I love that movie.
I also love that movie. Also, my mom was so allergic to many animals, so we just had outdoor cats. So maybe one day in the future, I'll have my own cat or my own dog as well. Uh, Fast forward to today, how do you think your kind of personal journey since then has really led you to lead diversity, equity, and inclusion, and specifically be at Plug and Play?
Yeah. So from preschool up until high school, I went to a private Catholic school my whole life. It was predominantly white, and I didn't realize the impact this was going to have on me in my future journey until I reached about like eighth grade in high school. And I kind of started my DEI journey there in high school, just bringing more awareness around the community. The school was located in Atherton, California, so it's all residential. It's a very fortunate neighborhood. And it was not like my family was fortunate or anything. I was the only one in my family that attended a privileged school of that sort. So just coming from my background of how different my home life was, and then when I got to school, it was just very different as well. And I really wanted to integrate those two and bring awareness as to, everyone going to the school, they're not as fortunate as maybe some of our peers. And I started attending conferences like there's one called SDLC, which was the Student Diversity Leadership Conference. So kids like myself that were different within school coming together from all around the world, learning about how we can navigate and help other people within our position. Really kickstarted my journey of talking about social awareness, DE&I. And then when I went to college, I originally wanted to go to an HBCU, but for multiple reasons that I don't need to get into, but I ended up attending a state school in California called Cal State East Bay. I chose that one because I wanted it to be very different from my experience from preschool to high school. It was the most, I guess, diverse school within California, state school. So that's why I chose it. And I studied psychology and sociology there. And that's what kind of kickstarted my journey. So before I got to Plug and Play, it was just meant to be a summer internship. And I was working on the supply chain team here. And I ended up staying full time. I'm here now 3.5 years later. And I can kind of talk about, how I transitioned from supply chain to DE&I in a little bit.
Thank you for sharing your journey and your story to this work. It sounds like it is a personal driver, and also when you were talking about Plug and Play, happy 3.5 year anniversary as well. I think when we're talking about work, it's a big part of a lot of people's lives. You don't know who you're working with unless you kind of ask about their story as well. Everybody's at a different point of their kind of life and career. When you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, how do you ensure that really all employees, no matter where they sit at the company, no matter what their job is, feel like they truly belong at Plug and Play?
Yeah, I think it just starts with a simple conversation of just saying hi. I mean, I don't think people should think too deep about it of, how can I find, I know a lot of people try to find, how do I relate to this person or how do I find a pinpoint? But I think just like having a welcoming smile and saying hi and to whoever, not just paying attention to their title, but there are all different aspects that build the business. It doesn't matter if someone's a janitor or security. I think at the end of the day, it just, you should say hi to whoever you cross paths with, because you never know, how that person contributes to your day, how they help you. And, when you're nice to people, they're nice to you. And that's, I think, how people should navigate like their daily lives and making sure that everyone feels welcome. Because at the end of the day, we all work for the same company, no matter what. And to be a successful company, you have to have employees that are happy.
Absolutely. Starting with that conversation, being open, saying hello, being welcoming, and really taking that mentality forward with everyone you encounter as well. I want to talk about one of the programs, Drive, first starting with the goals and what the North Star of the initiative is.
Yeah. So DRIVE stands for Diversity, Respect, Inclusion, Visibility, and Equity. And it's a program we just started this year for Plug and Play. And I guess that transitions from my story of, how did I move from supply chain to now starting this initiative? Just a little bit about Plug and Play itself. We are the world's largest corporate innovation platform and one of the most active VCs in Silicon Valley. So we invest in pre-seed and seed stage startups. So my work while on supply chain was being the program manager, accepting the startups that come into our program and connecting them to the corporate partners that best fit their needs. And just given our model, it's very hard to get into our programs, and we can only accept a certain amount. So on my time throughout supply chain, I accelerated over the course of, I guess, 2.5 years, about 500 startups around the world. But I engaged with about probably 3,000. And those were ones that we just couldn't help by accepting them into the program. And a lot of them ended up reaching out saying, hey, I didn't make it into the program, but is there a way that I can have help with mentorship or business development? Anything can help. And I always tried to, after graduating, to work psychology and sociology into my job because that's what I went to school for. Um, and I started noticing a trend that the ones that were reaching out came from underrepresented backgrounds. They looked diverse in some way, whether it was a woman founder, female founder, etc. So I noticed that trend and I was like, of course, like, let's see where we can get you help. And I started reaching out and leveraging our corporate partners and asking, hey, we have this Black founder. They really need feedback on their model. Can you find someone within the organization that, one, looks like them and can understand, the path that they walk through on the day to day, but two, that can give them actual concrete feedback and trying to help position them to be successful moving forward. So this was around the time of COVID that happened, and I started different webinar series for the company. There was Black founders in tech, women founders in tech, Latinx founders in tech, etc. I had startups that came from those backgrounds, as well as leveraging corporate partners from the top Fortune 500 companies to sit on the platform, raise awareness, and just create a conversation and dialogue about, what does it mean to be a Black founder in tech? What does it mean to be a woman founder in tech? So that kind of kickstarted the initiatives for Plug and Play itself. And at that time, I was still on supply chain and I went to leadership and I said, hey, we should do something more when it comes to helping underrepresented founders and diverse founders within tech. So myself and a few others from the company started doing research of, what is out there when it comes to underrepresented founders? What can we do? So we surveyed about 100 different diverse founders and just asked them the simple question of, what is a challenge for you when it comes to your business? Of course, for any founder, I think the top one will always be funding. But then the next, they said mentorship, business development, and then lastly, which was interesting, about 50% of them said they felt like they suffered from racial discrimination or bias. That was without us asking any sort of question. That was made them answer that question in that way. So we took that and we crafted this program, which we're now calling Drive. And the overarching goal is, of course, to diversify tech worldwide. As Plug and Play, we have about 40 different locations around the world, so we are a global company. And we really want to utilize that to help diversify tech and bring the advantages of being in Silicon Valley to anywhere around the world. So I guess the four main objectives of Drive is, one, being more intentional about the startups that we're accepting into our programs and intentionally filtering in more diverse founders. But two, I'm the first role for DE&I for Plug and Play. It has changed the shift of us internally. And I feel like if we're on this journey, we should be educating, of course, our employees around the importance of DE&I. What does DE&I mean? What does it mean to talk to people from different backgrounds? But we also want to educate our whole ecosystems. Like I said, we work with about 500 different brands. We engage with about 10,000 startups per year. So we want to provide that education to our ecosystem as well, through many modules of inclusive leadership training, the importance of storytelling, how to hire more fairly, what does unconscious bias mean, et cetera. But then at the end of the day, too, our bread and butter is tech. So we have an enterprise industry that helps corporations when it comes to their enterprise and ESG needs, but we want to take it a step further through Drive and start offering tech solutions that can help CHROs, heads of D&I, chief of staff, to help them solve problems when it comes to what their employees are facing internally, when it comes to things like pay equity, career development, and how to just overall cater to your employees more. And then lastly, the main reason why corporations come to us is, they want to be able to network and learn best practices from the same people in their industries. So I want to do that same by building a community around people that talk about DE&I, that care about DE&I. What are some best practices that have worked successfully for other companies, and how can we bring that into our organization as well? So it's an overarching goal for Drive, but in the meantime, it's just how can we diversify tech worldwide?
Those are some incredible goals, and the vision and mission of diversifying tech is so important. It requires a lot of resources, mentorship, and connection as well. And in terms of some of the results you've seen and you will continue to see, I'm sure you have many of these as well. Can you share a little bit about the results and perhaps one of your proudest moments really doing this work, especially as the first person in this role leading the initiative?
Yeah. I think probably the most proud moment, and I think when I stepped into this role, I think anyone when it comes to D&I is their main thing is data. Where are we at as a company? And of course, we want to focus on that internally, but just because I don't have a solid education in D&I background, eventually our goal is to hire someone that can do that and start analyzing that data for our employees. But since I'm more external facing, I want to focus on, okay, what is our ecosystem made up of? What are the startups that are coming through our ecosystem looking like? So I'm happy to announce that in November, we'll be launching a self-identification survey for the startups that come through our ecosystem of, if they want to identify as an underrepresented startup, what does that look like? Letting them self-identify themselves instead of our team just assuming that they're coming from an underrepresented background. And if they choose to identify, what are some extra tools and resources we can give to them through Drive to help them be as successful as they can be. Along with that, we're gathering data from our portfolio. So to date, Plug and Play, we officially launched in 2006. So we have invested in about 1,800 startups within our portfolio. We're currently gathering the data on that to see which ones of those have been underrepresented or diverse. We have about 35 unicorns in our portfolio as well. I think 5 to 6 of those come from an underrepresented background. So the goal is, of course, to get to more, but those have been the proudest moments of just where are we at as a company and how can we be better. So just gathering that data.
That's a lot of impact on a variety of business leaders and really opportunities, access to information as well. When we're talking about self ID, that's one piece of someone's individual story. We talked about your path to doing this work as well, and kind of want to ask the direct question around what role does truly storytelling and education play in a really successful diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy overall, based on what you've seen in the market?
Yeah, we've seen storytelling work greatly just in terms of how impactful it can be. I think, when companies are using graphs, reports, and statistics, like that's all great. But being able to communicate those things through storytelling has a different impact and it's more relatable. And we're going to be working with a certain group. I don't know if I can say the name right now because not everything's finalized, but they specialize in storytelling. So they train experts within their organization to help us as a company, as leaders and employees, and how to use their power of storytelling to enhance their personal and professional lives. Because they believe that one, from understanding personal stories, it can drive different cultural changes within your organization. It has your employees be able to relate to different things, and it's just more personable, especially like we are a family-owned company. So just even like our story of how we came to be, it's very touching from the outside looking in. And I think that's what draws people into Plug and Play, because it started as something that was very small, and it's come to be a very successful company. And that's usually how we start our conversations, is telling the story of Plug and Play, and it really intrigues and inspires people.
Yeah, absolutely. That inspiration, kind of why people seek out Plug and Play and want to work with you as well. In terms of an organization, we get this question a lot in terms of the role of someone who is leading diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. It's not just Dominique's job to say, okay, Plug and Play is an equitable place to work because of these things. You really need to have everybody accountable to creating that ecosystem and being on the same page. How do you see other leaders at Plug and Play really taking on that ownership mentality when we talk about intentionally creating equitable places to work?
Yeah. And I think you said part of it in your question of, I've seen a lot of leaders since I transitioned into this role, and it's a very fairly new role. I started in February. But since I've transitioned, I've seen a lot of the heads of teams holding themselves accountable, of correcting things that they are doing with their team, how they're having conversations with their team, and they're asking questions. And I think that's the one main thing that people are uncomfortable doing, is asking questions, because they don't know whether something will come off offensive. Of course, there's always a better way to ask when it comes to certain things, but I think just that step of people being curious and asking questions to learn, is what I've been seeing as a main difference from leadership. And by them doing it, it's been inspiring employees to speak out about things that, they want to see changed, or things that need to be addressed. So I think the leaders within the organization are really starting to realize the importance of this, and valuing the employees that are here has been the main thing, especially throughout COVID. I think has been a huge shift.
Absolutely, having that growth mindset, being a continuous learner as well. And I think when we ask questions, that there's always a conversation around impact and intent, and having good intentions when you're having these discussions as well. That can be really difficult to navigate the unknown too. And I don't necessarily think this is a bad word. What some people do when you have conflict in the workplace. There's conflict in all relationships, and workplace relationships are no different. One study found that only 39% of folks were really trained or coached on how to handle or navigate workplace conflict. How have you, or how do you resource folks, especially managers who have an additional responsibility, at least in my mind, to have these really hard conversations?
Yeah. We have been, of course, leveraging HR a lot. But obviously HR has a lot of other duties to fulfill. But we've been, through Drive, we've been getting a lot of training around having difficult conversations as well. So that we've been specifically lining up those trainings for our HR team. So everything will begin to start and account for in 2023. But we have been training our HR team to handle more tough conversations like these. But then also, you know, telling our employees, HR is there for a reason. If you need to talk to your employee, but maybe it's a hard conversation, there's always someone that can sit in on the conversation, help you through the conversation. But I think what has been an important shift for Plug and Play is our leadership, like, the president of Plug and Play has been sitting in a lot with HR and making sure that policies are being created around certain things, making sure that we're listening to the employees and trying to create training around certain things. And of course, these things take time. And that's why we, this year has been the main focus of, what are the complaints? What do people want to see change? And then in 2023, we'll start to implement those things and create more specific training around those certain topics. But to answer your question straight, just making sure people understand why HR is there and leveraging them to walk them through those conversations and feel protected and heard as well.
Absolutely, feeling seen, heard, and understood. You're not alone in these conversations, seeking out the resources, asking questions, and seeking to do better with each time you have to navigate it as well. Practice makes almost perfect. Too, in terms of the conversations you're seeing happening externally around diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're seeing a lot of companies try to really make that authentic investment and commitment in the space. Everything, and we know these conversations are interconnected to wellness, burnout, to total rewards, benefits, and really the entire employee experience. Is there something that is kind of the most exciting to you happening in the industry, and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's more so general the fact that like companies are just creating these roles for people. I get on like weekly calls with some of the top chief diversity officers from major companies. And I think the most interesting thing for me that has been most repetitive, I would say 9 times out of 10, when I get on a call, people will say that the George Floyd incident is what sparked their company paying attention to DE&I. And although it's unfortunate that an incident like that had to happen for the world to wake up, I think it's a step in the right direction that companies are even creating these roles and really trusting within their company to, have a section of their company dedicated to DE&I and dedicated to really understanding the backgrounds that their employees come from. So I'd say that has been the most interesting conversation is every time I get on a call, George Floyd is mentioned at least once. And it's clear that that has sparked like a movement in DE&I. And I think it's very important, and I hope it's something that is long lasting.
I also think it's something that is long lasting and really a public responsibility to understand the backgrounds of employees and recognize what is going on in the world around us as well. Dominique, is there anything that I didn't specifically ask that you want to share with folks who are listening or underscore any kind of key takeaways of the things that we have discussed today?
I would say just be an advocate for the people that look like you when it comes to the workplace. If you hold like a certain position where you can make decisions and be more intentional about the people that are being brought into your organization, make sure you advocate for the people that look like you. And I think the world that we live in is just sustained off of connections. So just be that person to be the connection for someone else to better their life.
Be an advocate for people who look like you. I think that's a great call to action. Create those meaningful connections. Say hello to people. Dominique, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening on AllVoices, we really believe in both employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.